Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our next session on the Female Leader Programme. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest today from Kiddy Partners. So Mike Altram, that you will see Cara O'Brien, and Charlotte Harmon, who will be leading our session today. And they will tell you more what to expect and their model of leadership that they would like to share with you today. But Kiddy Partners are leaders in leadership assessment, and they've developed lots of tools and resources. And today will be lots of self-reflection and thinking time today, but I will let them introduce the session in more detail. Before we start, I would very much like to congratulate everybody that was included on the Women to Watch Index this year. We hope you, if you came to the launch event, that you enjoyed it. And it was absolutely thrilling. Taya and I, Taya was like, I'm still buzzing, I can't go to sleep. It was such a fantastic session. We felt, and I hope this sounds not patronising, we felt so proud of the people that we knew and the index and the fabulous women that were showcased and the advocates. So well done to those. And for those who weren't included, next year, 2021 is the way to go. 2022 almost. So I'm just going to admit, Judy, bear with me. So welcome. Today's going to be very interactive. You're going to be working in the breakout rooms and your trios a lot. So we hope you enjoy, and I will pass to Mike from Kiddy Partners to explain more about the session.
Fabulous. Thanks, Joanna. And I expect Charlotte will be bringing up the slides any moment. So yes, it's really great to be with you today, and good to see the old Christmassy theme on some of the backgrounds. Yeah, I'll be heading down to the garden centre tomorrow, fighting with the crowds to try and get myself sorted out. So as Joanna said, Kiddy Partners work with our clients to assess and accelerate the right leaders for their tomorrow. And we've known Taya for many years and worked with her closely, particularly when she's been was at Merlin Entertainments. And I remember the launch of WIHTL a couple of years ago, and finding myself in the minority, which is obviously a good experience for me. And I find myself there again, but it's a really great network. We're delighted with the progress that you've all been making over the last couple of years, and really pleased to support this important program. Very briefly, just to introduce the three of us from Kiddy. So I'm managing partner of Kiddy. I've been working for 20 years as a business psychologist, working with mainly leading corporations, helping them establish strong talent pipelines. And before that, the first half of my career, I worked for Dulux Paints in a number of marketing, commercial and supply chain roles. And my last role on the corporate side of life was to be on the executive team for our global automotives business, responsible for finance, IT, HR and strategic planning. So that's a little bit about me. Charlotte, what's your thumbnail sketch?
Hi everyone, I'm Charlotte Harmon. Like Mike, I'm also a business psychologist by background and a senior consultant at Kiddy Partners, and specialising in the area of leadership. I've taken a bit of a lens, a D&I lens to my career so far, and have specialist research, knowledge and practice expertise in supporting women reach more senior levels in their careers. I looked at barriers to female career progression, have helped support leaders to be more inclusive in their style, to help foster a more diverse workforce and create a more inclusive environment, and currently looking at leadership moving forwards and the disruption that COVID is enabling for us to support people moving forward, moving into different types of leadership positions. So lovely to speak to you all this morning. Cara, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Cara O'Brien. I'm also a business psychologist by background. I'm a consultant at Kiddy Partners and have worked with Kiddy for about 2.5 years. My role is really to kind of support the design, the delivery, and then the analysis of the data that we have on the many varied projects that we work on, including supporting with the future of leadership research that Charlotte mentioned.
Fab, thank you very much. So I think it would be great to have our first slide, if that's possible. Lovely. Just going to fiddle around with my tech a little bit. Fab. Yeah, I mean, before we sort of dive into this, it's worth just saying that one of our experiences in working with many of our clients is that talent pipelines are blocked. And it's sort of ironic, really, because organizations need talent. They identify people of talent and they do things like putting them on programs like this. And of course, often, usually, the talent want to progress. But for many organizations, many individuals, it's just not happening. And that's frustrating for everyone. Those at the top of organizations feel that their talent pipeline isn't broad or deep enough, and they're often disappointed about the return on investment they get from talent management. The talent aren't getting the progression that they want, so it's easy for them to become disengaged and move on. And for those people in the talent and learning roles, they're often held accountable for a problem they can't fix on their own. So one of the things that we're doing at the moment is we're refocusing our activity really around helping organizations unblock those talent pipelines. And a lot of it involves giving accountability and insight to the individuals who are in those talent pipelines. So it's great to have the opportunity to share some of our insights with you today. And as you spend time talking about them with your colleagues, the thing to bear in mind is really what we're doing today, if you like, is that sort of 10% of where development happens. And our key focus is on enabling you to take opportunities to practice things in the 70%, really what your day job is. So that's really going to be our focus. And as we walk you through the framework that we've got for you to think about today, please do focus on how does this apply to me and what can I do with it when I'm back at base on Monday morning or whenever it is. The other thing just to say as we talk about our time together this morning is it is a moment to reflect. And we can see that you're all involved in busy operational jobs at the sharp end, if you like, of your organizations. And so we've designed the session so you have most of the time working in your trios, which we understand have been sort of set up for just this purpose. And today's a really good opportunity for you to build relationships with your trio colleagues and just spend some time sharing in terms of where do you sort of see yourself fitting in relation to the model we're going to share. So the aims for the session are this. As I've said, it's an opportunity to reflect on your leadership journey and your style. And we're going to be focusing on this idea of leadership versatility. Now, the idea of needing to adapt our styles and our behaviours according to the situations that we find ourselves in, or the behaviour or the people that we're working with, really isn't new. Situational leadership was first coined by a guy called Ken Blanchard decades ago. But of course, what has happened over the last decades is that the organisational context has become much more complex and change is happening at a faster pace. And so today, even more than ever, it's been really crucial that we spend time thinking about to what extent is our style matched to the situation in which we find ourselves. And I think particularly for you as a cohort and you as individuals, as you think about progressing your careers, you're going to be coming into contact with different sorts of situations. So versatility is really a kind of critical balancing act. And we've got a framework for you to think about that in terms of how you lead, and that's like your interpersonal style. And we'll be thinking about, are you more forceful or enabling? And what's the right approach in your current situation, and how might that change as you kind of go forward and progress? And also what you lead. So do you tend to be an individual who's more strategic or more operational? And again, are there shifts that you need to make now in order to be more effective and maximize your contribution in the current situation? And will that change going forward? The purpose really of today is to help you reflect and then to make perhaps one or two commitments to your peer colleagues that are going to be helpful to you in accelerating your development over the next few months. And with that, I'm going to hand on to Charlotte, who's just going to talk about the ground rules for today.
Yes, we just wanted to do a bit of contracting up front and make a few agreements with each other, because we want this to be the best learning environment for one another, and we want the best for each other. While the session is being recorded today, we just wanted to highlight that we will be treating everyone's contributions confidentially. We hope that you also take on the same spirit to enable people to feel comfortable being as open and honest with each other as possible. We also completely acknowledge that we are working in a strange virtual situation at the moment, and there may be interruptions, we may have tech issues, there may be kind of children appearing on screen. That is absolutely fine. Please mute, please kind of turn off camera if needed at any point in time, and please pop us a note if there are any technical issues. We kind of try and operate a kindness and patience approach to any issues like that at the moment. We will openly share resources and ideas with you, and we hope that you do so in return, and we really would like to encourage as much participation as possible today. Please do use the chat function if you don't feel comfortable speaking kind of in this forum. And we just wanted to kind of encourage everyone to be as present as possible and not distracted by other duties or devices. We've all got multiple devices in our environment at the moment, and just that we will obviously keep to time and encourage you to do so as well. So given those ground rules, was there anything that anyone wanted to add to that in terms of commitments that you'd like to make to the session today? No? Fab. Well, I hope that's all okay, and we'll get going with the main core of the session. So before we start off with self-reflecting, we wanted to make sure that we really ground this in why are we speaking about this today? Why are we introducing this session into a women's leadership programme? And the reason we're giving you the opportunity to self-reflect on your leadership style is that traditionally, up to this point, female leadership's been a pretty tricky terrain to navigate, and some of that is due to gendered views of leadership. And if we look back in time, very traditional views of what a leader is were often tied up with male attributes, assertiveness, strength, decisiveness. And that means that women are often penalised or looked at more negatively for displaying some of those traits or attributes. And it's quite a difficult way to become a great leader who's respected in an authentic way that feels natural. And if I bring some of that to life, men are often socially expected to take more charge in their kind of social roles. It's how we're brought up from kind of children through schooling. It's very socially ingrained as a behaviour, and some of the attributes associated with that are being strong, decisive and assertive. Those are also obviously associated with leadership more traditionally, and so when women take charge, they're viewed as maybe competent leaders, but they might be disliked because it violates the social norms of how women behave, because women are expected socially to take care, be more nurturing, be more emotional, be more communicative. And when women take care, they're often liked because it fits the kind of social role of women in society, but they're viewed therefore as less competent leaders, as traditionally those aren't traits that have been associated with leadership. And so it creates what we call this double bind for women, in that they can't really win either way. And we see examples of this in how women try and negotiate. It's often at a social cost to them because it transgresses that gender norm. And women tend to be, there's a lack of sponsorship for women, in that both male and female mentors tend to offer development to women, but are less likely to kind of stick up for them and advocate their behaviour. Now, this is not going to be a really negative session. I just think it's really important to acknowledge the past and acknowledge why women often have problems and difficulty finding an authentic and natural leadership style that they feel comfortable displaying and is viewed positively by others. Having said this, though, at the moment we're at a bit of a crucial point for female leadership. And we're starting to see this double bind easing ever so slightly. I think in recent years, there's been a lot of work to challenge social norms and biases against women in the workplace. And we're starting to see several trends challenging what great leadership looks like and separating that alliance between male traits and great leadership. I'll just kind of pause there in case anybody has any questions or reflections before we move on. Feel free to put anything in the chat if you do. Okay.
Great. So what's the context for leaders, be they male or female, in today's society, and particularly I think in light of the 2020 events? And as we said, we've kicked off a Future of Leadership project in the summer, which is being led by Charlotte. And it was prompted by a very simple question that many of us were asking. We can see that the world's changing. So what does that mean for the capabilities leaders are going to need to be successful? And a key part of that research, which we're just coming to the end of the first phase of, is talking with leaders and indeed listening with leaders and understanding how they're experiencing the changes in context that we can identify and sort of read about. And we've highlighted half a dozen of the key trends that we've seen. And I think first point really is these trends may not be new, but they are becoming normal. So flatter structures. I remember years ago when I was working at Dulux, the chief executive of the business I was working in said, right, we're going to have flatter structures, we're going to cut away a load of levels. And he ended up with, I think, 25 direct reports. Well, that didn't last long, but that trend, if you like, has been kind of going on, perhaps quietly in the background. You'll have seen in your organization, perhaps the pendulum swinging from one way to the other. But I think what we're now seeing is a commitment to flatter structures, simply because it's really important to connect the people who are steering the ship, if you like, with the people who are in the engine room, and to have fewer levels and layers. And of course, in many of the organizations that you'll be part of, there's just a cost dynamic to that. So changes in the way in which organizations are structured, but also I think the way in which they work. And we'll talk a little bit more about the leadership style that's going to be required in light of that. Team-based working, again, there's nothing that new to team-based working, but perhaps cross-functional teams getting across the silos are now becoming normal. And of course, the faster pace of change that we can all see going around us, and the uncertainty and unpredictability, and I think particularly over the last year, the volatility of that.
Yeah, and something that the last year has also done is really stepped up digitalization. It's forced a lot of organizations to take a lot of processes remote. And it's caused tech companies to fast track and accelerate some of the services that they're offering. A lot of leaders that we're speaking to at the moment are saying that elements of tech that they were predicting would enter their business in 2035, they're now expecting to enter their business within the next 5 years. So quite an acceleration in that space. And what it means is that the nature of jobs is likely to change, but also the amount of data that people have access to is likely to also increase at an exponential rate. And separate to the kind of change and digital piece, we're also seeing different types of people enter the organizations. And we're finding that younger generations have different motivators to people in more senior positions in organizations. Those younger generations are often more demanding, and kind of rightfully so, that there's a purpose to the organization aligned with diversity, sustainability, and other important elements. And they're also expecting their leaders to be more connected to them, more transparent, and they're expecting seat time with those individuals. And as a result of a lot of work that's been going on over the last few years, we're seeing leaders and organisations really showing an interest in increasing diversity in organisations. But what that also means is there's a lot of different perspectives, and there's a disruption to the culture that organisations have had in place for a really long time. So translating what that means for leadership then, I'll just hand back to Mike.
Yeah, so just picking up on a couple of these implications. So we've talked about pace, and I'm sure as you've seen over the past year, just that rapidly changing organizational context. Are people working? Aren't they working? Are we in lockdown? Aren't we in lockdown? The inability to plan with any degree of certainty means that balancing future looking, so kind of keeping our eyes on the horizon, with then making quick and rapid decisions is a kind of key capability that leaders are going to need. And aligned to that, it's making decisions which are beyond their areas of direct expertise. I think over the past sort of 10 or 15 years, we've seen the pendulum swing from growing general managers to growing, if you like, functional experts, and people having narrower and narrower career experiences. So really, I suppose what we're saying is we see that increasing, but that people will need to be able to make decisions quickly about things they don't really have any direct experience of.
Yeah, and what we're also seeing is that due to the flatter structures, the increased diversity, and the new generations entering the workforce, there's significantly more empathy and empowerment required. Leaders need to give away a lot of their control to enable flatter structures to work. And they need to understand the different motivators and different perspectives of people who are now part of their organisation. And they need to foster and enable a very collaborative atmosphere to see that organisation and that population work together to innovate, to make decisions quickly, and to make sure that everyone is connected and not off in a distributed way doing independent working. And so given this pandemic, and given other kind of key events that have happened this year, such as the kind of Black Lives Matter movement opening up, and the increased tech that we're seeing into the workplace, now is a fantastic time to be reflecting on your leadership style. And it's also a time for creating a bit of a female leadership advantage, because stereotypically some of these elements that we're describing here, and a more relational, empathetic and inclusive style, lead in some more social norms of women and how women are kind of programmed to operate, if that makes sense. So again, the double bind is easing more and more. And what we tend to see is women also who are most likely to break through the glass ceiling and enter senior leadership positions are women who are proactive in terms of setting career goals and career planning, and who are making ongoing reflections on a daily, weekly and monthly basis. Women who also are asking for increased responsibility and taking on riskier assignments to expand their experience and their versatility, particularly in the strategy space. So we really want to encourage you in this session to reflect on your leadership style, how it supports you to be successful in your current role, and how you can lead in your most authentic way that sings to who you are as an individual. So how are we going to enable you to do that is the big question, hey? We're providing you with a leadership model, and it's one that we use quite regularly with our clients. It's called the leadership versatility model that Mike alluded to earlier. And it really, we're trying to help you reflect on whether you're striking the right balance with your leadership behaviour. And it helpfully breaks down leadership into two pairs of leadership dimensions, focusing on how you lead and what you lead. Each pair within these dimensions it is of contrasting different types of behaviours. They're often opposing, but also complementary, and reflect the tensions and the trade-offs and the difficulties that make leadership a real balancing act, particularly when leaders face different types of situations or are moving upwards in terms of their career ladder and facing different types of challenges. And so what we're hoping that you're able to do today is first focus on how you lead in terms of your interpersonal style and how you interact with people, and then what you lead in terms of the type of organizational issues that you're focusing on, and help you work with each other to work out whether you're striking the right balance here or whether you need to be making a bit more of a shift into a different type of behavior, or whether you need to target your development in a certain area. So what we're going to do is take you through these dimensions now. And what we're going to ask you to do is self-reflect and plot where you think you are on this model. So we're going to take you through forceful and enabling first of all. We're going to describe it to you and ask you to plot whether you feel that you're doing each of these too little, too much, or whether you're striking the right balance. And then we'll do the same and go for the kind of strategic operational side of things. Before we launch into describing these and encouraging this, does anyone have any questions or reflections that they'd like to share with the group?
Everybody's being very shy. Come on.
Yes.
Oh,
You're not a shy group.
I was just going to observe that I think I have become more operational because of COVID, because I work for Green King, so we're obviously predominantly a pub and restaurant business. So I've had to step down and get more involved in policy making than I necessarily would have, and assist the team in being more reactive to the continuously changing rules that the government are putting everybody in this industry through. So I feel that if I reflect on myself, I'm far more operational than I was at the beginning of the year. It kind of felt like the right thing to do at the moment. The trick will be to pull myself back out of that as things progress and not stay there, I guess.
Absolutely. I think that's a very common challenge whenever organisations enter a crisis. That there becomes a much shorter term focus to cope with that, but it's as you say, it's knowing the right time to move away from that and move onwards and upwards in terms of taking that longer term perspective again, and hopefully with this vaccine it's enabling a bit of that soon. So thank you, that's great. Okay, well, we'll give you a chance to discuss with all of you, because I know it's quite a big forum at the moment, and we're talking about quite a personal thing for people at the moment, and we're operating in a very difficult environment. So we will move on. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I've just got a question really that kind of is just standing out to me after a conversation we had this week with our accountability trio, and it is really resonating just looking at this model as to, and it might be something that we cover later in the session, but how you can find a balance on being, super enabling and collaborative, and ensuring that doesn't come across as too passive.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I was reflecting on my style with our trio earlier this week and wondering whether I'm potentially too collaborative, and if that could come across as too passive sometimes and not decisive enough. And I guess it's just, maybe it is the blended approach and how we approach it, but I'm just interested in your view on how collaborative is too collaborative and how that can be perceived sometimes.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. I'm normally I would open that up to anyone else to offer an opinion, but I am conscious of time, so I will give a kind of bit of insight. And then what I'd encourage you to do is when we go out into the trios, discuss that further, and then message me if you want to talk about it a bit more later on in the session. But what we're hearing from leaders at the moment is that collaboration is incredibly important, but it's knowing when to step in and make the decision. And I think that's probably something that you're alluding to there in terms of the balance. And something that is becoming increasingly important is building up awareness of what people think, what people feel, and people's perspectives, so that you have that as a starting point rather than needing to over collaborate to work that out in the moment. So you're building up what that is. So you're starting from a collaborative perspective and mindset, so that less of that energy needs to be spent on collaborating and remaining passive, and you're able to come to that decision making quicker, if that makes sense. So a lot of great leadership at the moment is, how do you put out listening devices into your organization and with the people that you interact with to gain their perspectives, so you have them earlier on, and you need to expend and so people know that you're listening to them, they know that you understand their perspective, you know that you're working with them, but you're needing to spend less energy doing that in the moment to gather that perspective. And then yes, it's knowing when to step in and make the decision, and it's communicating the decision and the rationale behind it that shows how you've taken into account those perspectives, so people feel that they've been taken into account. I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully gives you something to reflect on and maybe talk about in your trios.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that.
No worries. Okay. We will move on, but I'm enjoying the questions and I'm enjoying the reflections. I think as we get on, hopefully there will be more of these. Cara, do you want to talk about the first dimension?
Yes. So first of all, looking at how you lead, first up is forceful. So this is about asserting yourself, taking the lead and pushing for performance. And it's split into 3 dimensions. So takes charge is about assuming authority, taking a more kind of traditional leadership stance in terms of giving directions and stepping in when problems arise. Decisive is about taking a position, letting people know where you stand, speaking up and asserting your views, making your mind up quickly and being decisive, what it says on the tin, and defending your position strongly, not backing down easily. Demanding is the 3rd dimension, and that's about conveying a sense of urgency and pushing people hard, having high expectations, giving critical feedback and telling people when improvement is needed, and then holding people to account, being firm when they don't deliver. So we'll just give you a few seconds to kind of read and reflect on what's on the screen, and then just like you to kind of jot down or think about where you might sit overall in terms of the forceful approach. So whether you kind of demonstrate that too little, the right amount, or too much. And then we're going to move on to the second approach, which is enabling, which Charlotte's going to talk through.
I see a couple of people just writing and looking down, so I'll just give you a couple more seconds. Think about that.
Can I just ask a quick question in terms of the taking charge, telling people what to do, and demanding, holding others accountable? Is it not contradictory? Because I feel like I hold my team accountable and I'm more like a demanding, but I don't want to take charge of everything all the time. So I don't try to tell people what to do. So I was just wondering how should I understand the taking charge versus demanding?
I think the taking charge is earlier on. It's giving out the instructions, and then the demanding is then, you know, expecting those results quickly, giving critical feedback, expecting a lot from people, so expecting people to follow those instructions and holding people accountable if they don't deliver on them. So picking up on people, asking where things are, giving critical feedback or positive feedback. It could be either, but giving feedback and kind of reacting to how things are going after those instructions have been set. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
And you can certainly hold people to account in a more empowering way. And we'll move on to that in a second.
I think that's the bit I'm struggling with, because there's some things in here, it depends on the situation that you're in and where you're leading from, whether you're in a project or whether it's longer term strategic. It's the flexibility between those two. And as I'm reading some of this, and I recognise some of those traits within myself, but at particular times of leadership, they are necessary. And it does seem a little bit sort of the word forceful, the sort of critical rather than constructive feedback is coming across as a negative leadership style for me reading this. I wouldn't necessarily say it is negative.
I completely agree with you. Yeah, it's not necessarily negative. But it's comfortable asserting power, which essentially is what we're saying here. So it's comfortable taking that more assertive stance. And you kind of hit the nail on the head there, saying it depends. And that's the whole point with this versatility, is sometimes you're going to need to bring in the more demanding nature, and sometimes you're going to need to step back, and it's reflecting on those. And maybe there are times when you're doing it too little, and maybe there are times you're doing it too much, or maybe you're striking the right balance, exactly as you're saying, by the types of situations that you're in. So I think it's really important to reflect beyond just, oh, do I do this all the time? And think at that nuanced level. Yeah, and the reason that some of this might be coming across a bit more negatively is this is some of the stuff that women are often perceived as it being negative for them to display. Rather, I think if we were in a more kind of diverse group, it might not be perceived as in such a negative light. Okay,
thank you.
Let's move on. So the opposite end of the spectrum here in the enabling sense is how you involve others and bring out their best. Again, it's split into 3 dimensions. And you can imagine that we're going to ask you to do the same thing here. So to kind of reflect on whether you're displaying too little, too much, or the right amount of these, depending on the situation, and then overall. But from an empowering sense, it's giving people scope and freedom to do their job. So giving them the authority, letting them do things the way that they want to do them, and letting them deal with their own issues, and not stepping in too early. The con of this might be not stepping in at all, and kind of leaving people to it. There are pros and cons of both of these styles of leadership, and why we need to strike a balance. The more participative element is how you involve other people. So asking for other people's input, really listening to what they have to say and showing how you're taking that into account, including them in the decisions that you're making, and being open to influence and having your mind changed. And back to the point earlier, that the kind of con of this is when do you actually make that decision, or are you spending too much of your time consulting? So yeah, there are pros and cons to this. And then the last is supportive. So really what it says in the tin, but are you supporting other people? Are you sensitive to how they're feeling and what they're doing? Taking time to coach and mentor them, support them through difficult times? Are you providing them with positive feedback and appreciation? And are you really believing in their ability to develop and fix things? The con of this, of course, could be giving people too much scope, and not challenging them sufficiently or holding them to account sufficiently if they're not delivering what you expect them to.
And I think just to chip in, I mean, as you're thinking about yourself, I mean, you may want to take a particular situation that you're working on at the moment, or something that's going to be happening for you over the next 3 or 4 months, and think about yourself in the context of that situation. Because as 1 or 2 of the points have been made, of course, what we should be doing varies according to the situation. So if you find it helpful, rather than just thinking about yourself in completely general terms, think about yourself in a specific work context. Either's good, but the purpose of it, this process, is obviously to help you reflect in the most helpful way for you.
while people are thinking, Joanna, are we able to launch that first poll?
If you can stop sharing, Charlotte.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so before we start, is everybody familiar with Menti? Is everybody familiar with Menti? So what I would like you to do, Menti is an online polling tool. So if everybody can get their phones and go to Menti, MENTI.com. And just let everybody just do that for a second. So MENTI.com. And then when you reach Menti, we would like you'll be asked for a number, and you'll see the number can everyone see my screen? So you'll see the number at the top of the screen, which is 8625808. So you should start to see something like that on your phone. And you can now rate yourself. So your names won't come up. It will just do this dynamically. So we'll start to get a sense of the group, where we sit as a group. So the first one is obviously forceful. That's perfect. People are starting to do it. There we go. I love watching these as the numbers come up and down.
It's interesting that we started off higher and now we're gradually regressing to the mean, aren't we?
So, yeah.
It's a very decisive people at the beginning.
Yeah.
5, 5, 5, 5.
Okay. So, and people are starting to change their mind after that, Taya. It's come down a little bit. Then people go, no, I am excited. Okay, so we'll launch the next slide. Okay. So the same thing, if you go, you'll see that the new rating has come up. Perfect.
I wonder if these scores would be different if our direct reports were filling it in.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I think back to your point earlier, a lot of this isn't just the situation that you're in, it's the people that you're dealing with as well. So how versatile is your style with the people that you're dealing with as well, or working for you?
Interestingly, this is available as a 360 if anyone would like to see people's thoughts on this as a calibration exercise.
So Charlotte, any thoughts on this poll before I stop sharing?
I think it's interesting, isn't it, in terms of supportive nudging out there. But maybe a few people showing that actually the balance is being struck in the right way here. It'd be interesting to hear people's thoughts as to why they've popped themselves, but leaning slightly towards the enabling, which yeah, isn't necessarily a surprise.
I think I had to average myself because I've got several very different direct reports. So I sort of averaged myself before I then fed into your own average, because I think I hit it right with some, and others I'm probably too involved with, and I need to let loose a little bit more.
Well, I think that's a really nice reflection, and maybe, as Mike was saying, as you're looking forward in terms of really what you want to be focusing on the next 6 to 12 months, if there's any particular individuals that you want to be working with in a different way, we are about to now pop you into your groups, and Cara, I'll hand over to you to kind of brief people on this, but yeah, be important to take that into account and have a bit more of a nuanced conversation there. Cara.
Thank you. So we want, as Mike said at the beginning, we want to make sure that you have a good amount of time to talk and connect in your trios, share tips and success stories. So we're going to put you into trios in breakout rooms to reflect on a few questions about how you lead. So balancing those forceful and enabling approaches. Afterwards, due to timing, we're going to move straight on to the next section and talk about what you lead, rather than having a kind of group discussion and sharing what you've discussed in your trios. So we're really intending for these breakout discussions to be really fruitful. So please do note down anything that you're talking about, any key takeaways to take forward. We have got a slide just showing the questions, if we're able to bring that up. But in your trios, we would like you to firstly share your self-ratings on the forceful and enabling dimensions and the kind of reasons behind those ratings. Then we would like you to think about and discuss anything that's holding you back. So personally or in your organisation, any barriers that are preventing you from kind of hitting the right balance between the forceful approach of taking the lead, pushing for performance, and then that enabling approach of creating conditions for others to lead and contribute. The third thing we'd like you to do is share any kind of success stories, tips, great stories from people that you know who have kind of struck the balance well and what they're doing. And then finally, think about and note down anything to do differently in the future. So 4 things to kind of discuss in your trios. So Joanna, I think you've got everyone organised into breakout rooms. We're going to give you around 10 minutes to discuss these questions, then we'll pull you back into the main session and move on to the next section.
Thank you. And just to say, because unfortunately a couple of people couldn't come today, there are a couple of duos and mostly trios, but a couple of duos as well. So I'll open the rooms now and you'll be asked to join. And we'll start to see people disappear. Do you mind to stop sharing just for a second?
Of course.
Just make sure that everyone's gone. Perfect. I'm just going to join a room quickly because I've had to put someone in there that was on their own. And right. They'll be going, you're not in my trio, so bear with me. I will be back in a second.
We've still got a few here as well, Flora, Sarah and Dominique.
That's okay. I don't go into a trio because I'm just I'm from Q5 who are sponsoring the programme, so I'm not in a trio. So I'll stay here.
Good, thank you. And Sarah, are you supposed to be popping into a trio?
Let me just check.
Sarah, you're on mute if you're trying to answer us.
Brilliant. Oh. I love this.
Always a relief when everyone ends up in their own rooms.
I know. Well, the trick will be when we bring them back and then send them back in again, because we've never done that before. So that is new for us. So let's see if there's anything that will come up from that. But yes. But cool. So how did you think that first part went? So I think they were a bit shy in the beginning, but I think they got a little bit more warmed up, didn't they?
Yeah, and to be honest, it's fine because we don't really have time for them to ask questions to get through the content. So I think that's fine. And to be honest, it is quite a personal thing talking about how you lead, especially if you don't know other people too well. So that's really the purpose of setting them off in this way. So
This was for 20 minutes, wasn't it?
It was. We're not going to be able to spend that amount of time because it just took a little bit longer to get started. But we got a couple of good questions before they kicked off into it. So
what time do you want them back then? Did we tell them how long they had? I don't think we did we?
Cara very wisely said approximately 10 minutes, which I think is probably about the right answer.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So just let me know when you want a cup. So if we bring them back, what, just after past?
I'd say 10:35 would be my
okay.
thought. I think in terms of what we do between now and 11 o'clock, obviously we need to do the sort of second tee up and breakout. And then I think we will end it there and ask them to kind of agree how they're going to take it forward in their trios as a piece of follow-up work.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, that they don't have to do that because a lot of them have got meetings booked in already.
Yeah.
For their trios, as we know. So, okay, perfect.
So one thing to think about for future sessions is just to have an icebreaker at the beginning. Then we get people engaged. So because otherwise people tend to start to get passive and just sit back and watch what goes on the show. So perhaps a little kind of way of engaging people, either if it is starting with a question, put everything in a chat, answer, just to get people in that mood of thinking and externalizing what they are thinking. And perhaps, Charlotte, when you ask for questions or feedback, ask them to put that in the chat. They don't have all to speak, but at least we can see and you can comment on that. So they're engaging, via the chat function.
Right. Because I think we mentioned it with the chat, but I think they just seem a bit quieter.
Yeah, but if you say like, just we want to know your reflections, just put them in the chat now.
Yeah.
And post, and they have to do it. They can't just, sit back and wait for others. Most people will do it.
No, and it's quite common, isn't it, that they struggle with, but this is me, and I'm that, and I'm this, and I'm different things, different day.
Yeah, well, leadership behaviour is a very complex thing, isn't it? It's very situationally dependent. So, yeah, hugely common that they may struggle with that or have questions about that. Everyone tries to justify their behaviour in their head as well. So it's, but if that's needed, then I'll do that. But if that's needed, I'll do that, and that's what I do. So yeah, it's very common.
Is there an aspect, Charlotte, around learned behaviour as well? Because you have natural tendencies to be in one, and you actually a lot of the time learn the behaviour to do the other as well. So I don't know if that's something worth.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that when we accompany this with like personality questionnaires and psychometrics. So, where do you start from in terms of your personality preferences and your motivations and your drivers? And then when you kind of act outside of those preferences, it's often then a learned behaviour, and it's just a little bit more difficult. It's not to say that people can't do it, it just will take more energy, and it might feel a lot less natural to the individual. We liken it to, if you're right-handed and you break your arm, you need to write with your left hand. You can do it and you'll learn how to do it, but it will feel clunkier. So yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see how many of them come through with, if their teams have been reduced, which I'm sure they have in COVID, the operational side will come to the fore more than the strategic side, won't it? So it's trying to remove the COVID lens, which is really difficult, and I'm not being flippant, but because that's a moment in time, isn't it? Because all of them I think would have been forced far more operationally in their focus.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Top up my coffee.
Yeah. Get around him, Mike. It is so cold. I want your blanket, Taya.
I know. I'm just all wrapped up like a sausage, just all. in a blanket, just so cold. I've got one of those fluffy ones.
Did you see Sarah came back?
Yeah.
Which is good.
Mm. So we just have to wait for Nadine, and then we need to tell everybody that we've got this, because we haven't got many people signed up, do we?
I think we had about 3 yesterday when I checked, but we just put it in the WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
So, and I'll follow up with the people from today.
Is it? It's a webinar.
Yes, I think so.
I don't understand how we set these things up. Sometimes it's a webinar, sometimes it's a meeting. Yeah, we only have 3 people signed up for that.
It depends if you need breakout rooms or if you need a survey, because you can't do both in the same thing, which is ridiculous. So if you want breakout rooms, you need the meetings. And if you want a survey, you put it in.
No, no, that I understand, but why we set up the lunch and share as a webinar?
I don't know. I have to ask Laura.
Did she do it?
I think so. Was her or Gina? Oh, it might have been Gina actually, because Gina did it. Yes, that's true. Anyway, yeah.
So what happened to the people that we've missed in action?
I don't know. I've texted
We've not heard. So is it kind of 2 or 3 people still?
No, it's 3. So it's Barbara, Joe Iveson, and Amy. So Amy from Nando's, Barbara from Compass, and Joe is from Delaware. So.
And 2 of them, 2 out of 3 had accepted the invite.
Right, yeah, and also we put it in the WhatsApp, and Laura chased this week. She emailed all of them, and she was highlighting who'd registered and who hadn't. And
So what you say is the problem with them not turning up is one, you mess up the accountability trios that they can't work, and 2, you don't turn up, you don't even send your apologies.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be kind of that.
Yeah, that's rude. Yeah. Especially, I mean, that we did put this in after we published, which is fair enough, but then don't accept the invite.
Yeah.
You know, say, I'm really sorry, like Sean and Gail did. We're off, we can't do it, I'm sorry, which is fine. But then not just to turn up on the day is a bit off.
Yeah.
We're being forceful.
talking about high expectations and talking about giving criticism.
So I've bought a new pen because I have in my house, I love to take notes. That's how my brain works. I have in my house a stack of notebooks like this. I thought, what can I do? I need to get one of those pens that I can just use my iPad. So all last night I was doing my notes. It was brilliant. And could I open the notes this morning? No. So I had all my, so technology has not been my friend this morning. So I have to work out the app and why I can't open my notes, but hopefully it will save space in my house for years to come.
Yeah, I've got a lot of pens I can send you.
You're a pen pal.
I've got more pens than notebooks. That's my problem.
Do they all work though, Mike?
Too many of them do. Yes. I was in the habit of picking up a pen from this place and that place.
No. Do you like nice pens, or is it just kind of, oh, that's a nice pen? My dad has a fetish with fountain pens and has ridiculously expensive fountain pens, like 4 of them, which are ridiculous to have because he never uses them.
Yeah, no, I like fountain pens, but I've got one which is probably a bit dried up. I like pens I like pilot pens, actually, these ones. They sort of flow, the ink flows onto the page. So it's a bit like a fountain pen. But I'm useless with pens because I leave them everywhere, so. Although it's hard to do that at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you guys going back to the office or not yet?
Sometime next year, I think, is the you. Yeah.
I'm just typing to the group.
Yeah, I was about to say, are you able to click the close button, because that will give them 60 seconds to make their way back in, won't it?
It will. So I've just sent them a little note saying 2 minutes. We'll actually be 1 minute, but no one's going to.
No one's going to quibble.
No, exactly.
I'm gonna say, I was asked whether I was joining a board meeting next week in London.
Really?
And I was like, no, I'm not.
Just before Christmas?
Didn't even cross my mind, honestly, that, you know, somebody would even consider, you know, going into a meeting in London. And I was told that, I'm going 3 times a week into the office in London. And I'm like, yeah, but you already had the virus. I haven't, number one. Yeah. Number two, what has changed between, you know, 2 days ago when we were under lockdown and now? Nothing. So it's just like, and somebody else invited, one of our advisory board members invited me out for lunch in London next week. I'm not going out for lunch. First of all, I'm not getting on a train for 4 hours back and forth, plus the tube for another.
And it's illegal. You're not allowed to go for lunch.
For lunch.
You know.
Yeah, but I think that I think a little bit now, but certainly after Christmas, there will be that kind of pressure of people saying, okay, now back to normal, come to the meetings, and I'm not going to sit in a room all day, you know, with expectations are quickly going to change.
People will be coming back in 4 seconds.
Yeah, that 10 minutes goes far too quickly.
Hayley.
We say our 10 minutes goes far too quickly. We had that half or something together the other day, Hayley, and we still went over.
Yeah. We did. We've had 2, haven't we, since?
We've had 2, and we ran over on both.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear the trios are being useful.
Very, very useful.
Good.
Because you realize that you are not alone. I mean, what you are thinking, at least in our trio, you feel that, oh, actually, we are quite all similar in the way that we are thinking and we position ourselves. So that's really good.
Very important to support each other and share coping strategies. It's one of the best ways to support other women.
Good to know we can reopen the breakout rooms, so that's good.
Excellent. Well, we're conscious of time, so we'll motor on into the strategic operational mix, but we would really love it if you could post into the chat any kind of real things that struck you out of that conversation that you'd like to share with other people in the group. Really important, as we were just saying, to share stories. So please do post anything in there.
Sorry, will these slides be coming out to us or available to us? Yep, great. Busy trying to write notes and I can't always read what I've written, sorry.
That's fine. Okay, so moving on to the strategic operational lens then. So again, you'll predict what we're going to ask you to do. So please self-reflect as we're going through this, whether you're displaying this kind of too much, too little, or the right amount, given what you're trying to work on at the moment and in the next 6 months. So being strategic is all around positioning the organisation for the future. And again, 3 sub-dimensions. The first around direction, which is long-term strategic planning, taking a bigger picture perspective, so zooming out, and keeping up with what else is going on in the market or any trends that are impacting your organisation. And due to that forward focus, really anticipating when you need to change direction and kind of, looking forward for that. The second is expansion, so willing to be bold, being ambitious about wanting to grow the business, jumping on new opportunities quickly, and willing to invest to grow the organisation. So take some risks there. And the third is innovation, so to what extent do you really question the way things are done, the status quo, embrace new ideas early, and introduce new and original ideas yourself, as well as embracing them from others, and trying to really create that safe environment where people can come to you with new ideas or suggestions and work through those with those individuals. Just give you 30 seconds or so to think about that. Okay.
Okay, and finally we've got operational. So this is about focusing the organisation on the short term, so the details of execution. The first dimension is execution. So that's about this drive for results and getting things done. Getting involved in the tactical details of execution. So rather than zooming out at a big picture level, focusing in. Being concerned about the needs of internal stakeholders or processes. And then also managing the day-to-day details and getting involved in actually solving the problems. The second dimension is focus. And that's about being conservative about risks and kind of playing it safe. Being practical about change and careful not to take on too much, introducing change in kind of small increments. Being efficient, focusing on the key priorities, and also careful to conserve resources, kind of time and money. And then the third dimension is order. And this is about being consistent, relying on what has worked in the past. If it isn't broke, don't fix it, that kind of approach. Being organized and disciplined, structured and methodical, using processes in a disciplined way, and then monitoring progress and following up. So as we've done before, we'll just give you a few seconds to kind of reflect and think about the extent to which you use that.
Joanna, load up Mentimeter in the background. I'll stop sharing in a second and we'll launch the poll.
I think, Charlotte, just one thought here is it's really hard to say what is right, too little and too much. I mean, you know, thinking about that today and the role you have today, thinking about tomorrow, a potential role you might have tomorrow. I think it's really, really tough to rank yourself. Just a thought.
There will be elements that will be slightly more difficult. I think this is particularly difficult at the moment in the COVID context, right? Where you can't predict too far in the future, and we totally appreciate that it's a tough ask.
I don't think it's about the business in the future as such. It's about what is right for you now might not be right for you tomorrow in a next role or in a different part of the business. So, you know, in the context of a development program, what is right is difficult to answer.
Sure. So I think then to help guide that, and Mike, Cara, please do jump in, it's thinking about where you want to go and if there are any key changes that you need to make that step up, sideways. So if your next step will require a difference from you in this, and how you're going to get there, if that's what you're wanting to focus on at this kind of session, is how do I get to my next role? How is it different to what I'm doing right now? So how can I position myself for that, and how can I get myself there? So is it requiring more or less of this swinging pendulum?
Yes, and I think as with any framework, it's simply a sort of thinking tool. So in the moment, it's an opportunity just to say, okay, well, what am I, where do I need to sort of pivot or adjust?
Okay, I'll stop sharing. And yeah, if we could launch the poll and just see where people are feeling at the moment.
Perfect. It's going to be a different number. This is slightly. Okay, can everybody see that? Whoops, there we go. So the number is 725694. If everybody would like to pop to Menti. Let's see.
Starting off on the too much again and gradually creeping down.
So it's in that 3, people feel they've got the right balance. Do you want to go straight to the other one as well?
Yes, please.
Okay. There we go. Everyone's got the hang of this now.
Interesting. So maybe a little bit too much of this.
Okay.
Maybe they need to swing a bit further down the scale on this, perhaps, from this.
So I'll stop sharing there.
Is that, Mike, is that a surprise to you just to see this kind of results, or is it fairly, common and to be expected that people tend to, in a group like this, you tend to have people sticking in the middle?
Yes, and it's certainly not a surprise to people feeling that they're being more operational. As a sort of that's the of the 4 dimensions, that from memory seems to be the largest spike. Very clear. I mean, many of you are, if you like, in that mid-level leader. So you're the people who have to translate the intent into reality. I think there it is. If we talk about sort of juggling or balancing, it's a tough balance to strike. So I think as you think, particularly in terms of, as you seek to deal with more strategic issues, more strategic conversations, figuring out what you can do to kind of get out of that operational box is going to be really, really helpful. And that might, I mean, clearly different people have rated themselves in different ways, but that would be a good focus for the trio pair session that we're about to have.
Can I challenge a little bit on this? Because on the strategic and operational, because as a good leader, do you not have to be good at strategy and kind of long-term thinking and innovation and opportunities, but also be very, very focused on the execution? Because if you don't execute, and if you don't get things done, and if you don't have the attention to detail, things will go pear-shaped.
Yeah.
So, isn't there a question of achieving a balance of both, because it's
exactly
situations, but even similar situations require that you keep high level and long term, but also you are focused on the delivery and the getting things done.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's pivoting between the two, isn't it, in the context of a particular business challenge. I agree completely. So although their intention, the ideal is both and the ideal is, as it sort of says on the scale, doing the right amount in the situation.
So could I just say, I think that all of us who are on a career path, naturally, as you're lower down the career path, you're much more operationally focused.
Yeah.
And as you grow into a leadership position, the thing that you haven't done before is the strategy. And speaking from my own position, I've literally just moved into a leadership position, and I'm really clear that the strategy is the bit that I need to learn, really clear, and that's the bit that's hard to practice, because my previous job was totally operational. It was executing the strategy. I was the one that had to keep an eye on the costs and all of the sort of logistical things. That's exactly what I need to learn.
Yeah,
the strategy stuff. And so I'm not, if other people are in that situation, I'm not surprised that everybody is more operationally focused, and that's where their skills and natural styles are now, and that the strategy is the bit that doesn't come so easily and we have to learn. That's partly why I'm here.
Yes, absolutely. And the good news is I think you've got a session in the new year when the guys from Q5 will be talking about the strategic perspective. And so maybe what you can take from today is, well, what are the things that you're going to need to dial up or dial down as you embrace your new job that will help you to do that? And then put, if you like, a bit of theory together with practice in that way.
But I also think the current circumstances, COVID, I'm not surprised to see the operational score where it is. And actually, I think the strategic score is still good. It's hard to be really strategic when you don't really know what the next 6 months is going to look like, particularly in the areas that all these lovely ladies work in. So to me, I totally expected probably the operational score to be where it was, but would be different in 12 months' time, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Well, let's give you guys an opportunity to just discuss that briefly in your trios, because we're conscious of time and we want to get you out for anything else that you've got going on the rest of your lives beyond 11 o'clock.
Something I'd say as we pop you into those breakout rooms is anyone who feels like they have a strength in this area and they've been doing more of this recently and maybe doing it a little bit too much, maybe volunteer in the group to support other people who've had less of this experience and who are struggling with this, and kind of scaffold and support each other is a real strength that this program will give you. So I'd encourage you to come forward on the chat and volunteer to support other people if you feel that this is something, maybe you're even doing too much. So how can you leverage that and help other people? We'll pop you in those groups.
Perfect. Bye, everybody.
Your trios. I mean, firstly, we're very aware we've not given you much time to discuss. So hopefully you've got some things out of today's session, and particularly the framework that you can use to power your trios for the next few weeks. What would be a great thing to do, given that this is a development program, is to boil that all down into you identifying 1 or 2 areas that you can personally work on over the next few months, and really just hold yourself accountable to your trios for that. And we'll be rejoining you on the day of your graduation, which seems a long way away at the moment, 23rd of March, but it's going to come round soon. And so we look forward to checking in with you then and hearing how you've all got on. We'll be sending you some resources following up the session today, and I'll hand over, I think, to, who will I hand over to, Joanna?
Thank you, Mike. That's perfect. And thank you so much, Mike, Charlotte and Cara, for a fabulous session. Lots of content, and it feels we're just saying blink of an eye. And I just would like to finish. I would like to bring Dominique in from Q5. Dominique, you've listened to the whole session, just to share your thoughts and reflections before we finish.
Thanks, Joanna. I thought it was a really super session. I loved how open everyone was about sharing their thoughts. 2 quick things from me, I guess. My observation as a leader over, I guess, the last 15 years or so has been that in times of stress, either for myself personally or the business, I go to my comfort zone. I go to what I'm comfortable doing. And so just, I think it's a watch out, really. All of your businesses are going to be under so much pressure at the moment. Just watch that you're not being forced back into your comfort zone rather than pushing yourself as a leader into new areas to explore and to develop as a leader. That would be one thing. And the other thing I would say, I think to the lady that was talking about doing a strategy role and it being new, I think don't be afraid to share that with your team, with your peers, with those above you, to say, one of the things I'm working on is being more strategic. I think it's great to be open and honest about that, and for people to, so that you will be amazed how much people will support you in that. Just 2 of my thoughts, but a great session. Thanks so much for involving me.
Perfect. Thank you, Dominique. And we hope you've enjoyed today. Thank you again to Kiddy Partners and the team there. We really look forward to seeing you again in March. Don't forget, next week we have the roundtable with Keith Barr, the Chief Executive of Intercontinental Hotels Group, which will be again another fabulous session, knowing Keith as we do. And we really look forward to seeing you there. And don't forget to please contact your mentors. You will have confirmation of your mentors now to start that process as well. And any questions with that, please do let me know. Have a fabulous weekend, everybody. It's and start putting those Christmas trees up if you've celebrated in that way. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.